Okay, it is time for my Real Thoughts review on My Little Pony Season 6, Episode 23. We are almost at the finale, and get the fact that I've already watched the finale and just know that we are almost there. These episodes may be coming out, and I will watch them late, but I will put up the reviews when we get closer to the official release dates. Also, I've been having even more problems with my Sims. Not only is the game running out of memory, but now my computer won't go online and it won't let me play the game offline. Anyhow, here we go, time for the episode. Our story starts off with Apple Bloom lying about a mistake that she made when packing some boxes, and she accidentally ships Filthy Rich a box full of cider instead of a box full of Zap Apple Jam. After straightening up the issue, after the credits sequence, Applejack sits down with Apple Bloom, and she, Big Mac, and Granny Smith tell us all a story of Applejack during her younger years when she was maybe about a teenager or thereabouts, and a time when a lie of hers caused some major problems for the entire Apple family. This gave me some of what I wanted, but it didn't give me or the rest of the fandom the one thing that we really wanted, which was a chance to see Applejack's parents when they were still alive. I would speculate that based on certain logics and deductions that Applejack's parents in this timeline are still alive at the point of the story being told. If Filthy Rich and Spoiled Milk haven't married to become Filthy Rich and Spoiled Rich, and they would not have had a daughter before getting married, and would have Diamond Tiara after being married, and Diamond Tiara is about the same age as Apple Bloom, then I would wager that Diamond Tiara, Apple Bloom, Scootaloo, Sweetie Belle, and other characters of that age bracket like Pipsqueak and Button Mash and so forth, at this point in time have not even been conceived. And it does seem from the way they're drawn that all of these characters are about the same age, so I'm going to say such characters were not born until after the events of this episode. Flashback begins by revealing just how different Applejack and Big Mac were at their teen years. Big Mac was a highly talkative pony who never stayed quiet and never let other ponies have words in and never listened to what they had to say. And Applejack was a frequent liar, always trying to cover up her mistakes and have things go in her favor by telling all kinds of lies. And she tells a pretty big one when she agrees to let Filthy Rich have a couple of barrels of apple cider to sell that Granny Smith later forbids her to sell for certain reasons. When Applejack has to retract her offer of letting Filthy Rich have the cider, Filthy decides to cut off all ties with the Apple family and stop doing business with them. Not wanting to lose business, Applejack tells a lie about Granny Smith being sick, and that's why he can't have the cider, not because she's going back on her promise that she made. So rather than try to explain why he can't have the cider because it'll go bad before he can have a chance to sell it, she makes up a big story. At first it seems like the lies got her off the hook and she just needs to buy a little time. But then Filthy Rich and Spoiled Milk show up at the door to visit Granny Smith while she's sick. Applejack has to continue lying to make up excuses as to why Granny Smith can't be at the door, and eventually one lie piled up on top of another lie on top of another lie lands Granny Smith in the hospital. Then Granny Smith has to really be at the hospital when Filthy and Spoiled go to visit her at the hospital. So Applejack, Big Mac, and Granny Smith have to run down to the hospital. Granny Smith gets dressed up as a doctor. Big Mac gets tucked under some sheets to pretend that he's Granny Smith. And Granny Smith almost amputates Big Mac. There's a lot of fascinating things that we get from these extra backstories, including a few unfinished backstories that we hear from Big Mac that the show seems to be annoying us by intentionally not giving us the full Big Mac backstories. But we do get just enough of each backstory that we can imagine what his full backstory might have been. Even more interestingly, we get background appearances from Cheryl Lee in her 80s look, Big Mac giving her a look of being interested in her as she passes him by, a pair of twins who are bona fide versions of the twins from The Shining, and good old Derpy in the not-so background with her eyes bandaged up, implying that she either was born with messed up eyes and had eye surgery to try to correct it that obviously didn't go well, or that some kind of accident befell her and caused her eyes to become messed up. That's why they've been bandaged. Whichever of those two stories you prefer to believe is up to you, of course. It was a lot of fun getting to see younger Applejack and hearing Big Mac talk a lot and seeing how their personalities drastically changed from this experience. Though logically it's probably not this experience alone that would have changed their personalities, but rather that would have started their personalities on a slow change over the course of time. It's also interesting to note that young Applejack does not have her hat at this early in her life. So at some point in her life, the iconic hat she wears all the time came into her possession, and she's worn it ever since then. It's not a hat that she's had from this young in her life. So it's another interesting story that could be looked into sometime down the road. I would love to hear more stories about Applejack and the other main six as they were in their early years, their babyhood, their childhood, their teen years. But you do have to be very careful when telling stories in the past. You have to protect your continuity and not make all kinds of errors. You don't want My Little Pony to spin off some kind of pony equivalent of Muppet Babies or some pony equivalent of Star Trek Enterprise. It is a nice chance when you go back in time, however, to play around with characters who have already been reformed, because in the past they haven't been reformed yet. Telling stories in the past would be a great way to see Diamond Tiara be a brat again, instead of being whatever personality she ends up adapting after remaining reformed. It would be a great chance to show Luna still in the moon, and Discord still as a statue. And there's a lot of stuff that could be set up in a sort of expanded backstory kind of way. Another observation is the fact that Filthy Rich is a lot nicer a character in Ponyville than he is in the Equestria Girls universe. But that's chalked up to the fact that human characters and pony characters, even if they have the same name, have completely different experiences and sometimes drastically different personalities. And even after her lesson that she's learned about lying, AJ still has to struggle with telling the truth on occasion and will still sometimes revert back to being forced to tell a lie. But she's not the element of honesty for no reason. She learned a lesson a long time ago and it stuck with her for most of her life, and it's something that she tries to keep doing and prides herself on being the honest one. It's a lesson she may have to learn again, but she'll never be a liar quite as bad as she was in her childhood. The story did sort of mess around with a few headcanons, to be sure. I think a lot of people had all kinds of stories explaining what events led Big Mac to stop talking, and what kinds of strange backstories would have led up to Applejack receiving her hat, how old the ponies were when Applejack's parents died, and so on and so forth. This definitely gives us more information that we never had, gives us some new stuff to work with, and puts to rest a few things that we maybe were never certain of. Oh no, it was a good story. A bit hard to get through on the first viewing because I hate stories about characters who lie. But once I know where the story's going and how it ends, I was able to watch it a bit better on repeat viewings. This isn't really that great an episode for me to watch on my own, but makes for a really fun episode to watch when watching others react to it, because there's a lot of fun stuff for them to react to. And it's a good episode for spotting fun little details in the background that help tell stories that were previously untold, even if we only get a small snippet of each of those stories. Overall, it's a decent production, and I find myself talking more about what it could have been, what I wish it was, and what I'm glad it wasn't, rather than talking about what it was. And I think that's probably where the more interesting conversations are for this episode. What we're glad it wasn't and what we wish it could have been. The little what ifs it had been different type of conversations. It's not the first time and probably won't be the last time that bronies have had a better idea of how to write an episode and would have wished that the writing had gone in a different direction. Anyhow, that's about all I can say without repeating myself, so thank you for watching and good night.